The second question which was asked from modern India, this question is, why was there a certain spurt in famines in colonial India since the mid-18th century? The question is again, why? Reasons also clear. Why was there a certain, the key word is certain, spurt, certain rise in famines in the colonial India since the mid-18th century? So in order to understand the question, first of all, you need to underline the key words of the question. So why was there a certain spurt in famines in colonial India since the mid-18th century? Again, introductory part must indicate the context or the background of the question. Body should have coherence of ideas and points, and conclusion should be basically to summarize the developments. So first of all, what would be the context or background of this question related to famines in India? The context would be British East India Company came to India with primary objective to maximize their profit. British adopted several economic policies which affected the livelihood of Indians, leading to famines. Clear? So context would be the profit motive of the private trading company. So context you will write that British East India Company came to India with primary objective to maximize their profit, and therefore they adopted several exploitative policies in India, leading to recurrent famines. Clear? Then you'll come to the body. Clear? Why was sudden famine, spurt of famine colonial India from mid-18th century? Now first would be the point. Mid-18th century, the first major would be, factor would be, you have to write reason. The first would be the conquest of Bengal. Why this is very important, we need to understand. Bengal was the most prosperous province of India. With conquest of Bengal, British began to have control over the rich resources of Bengal. They went on plundering the resources of Bengal, and therefore in 1770 only, severe famine broke out in Bengal. And in this famine of 1770, almost one-third of the total people of Bengal suffered casualty. Clear? So they got wiped away. So conquest of Bengal led to thorough exploitation of Bengal resources, and that resulted into famine situation. In fact, famine occurred in 1770, leading to heavy casualty. Clear? This was one major factor. Another major factor that led to spurt of famines was British land revenue policy. According to this land revenue policy, British began to collect heavy land revenue from the peasantry class. Since peasantry class had to pay huge amount of land revenue, whether in the permanent settlement, Mahalwari settlement or Rayatwari settlement, they were left with meager amount to survive. And in case of any natural calamity like droughts and flood, people did not have sufficient reserve to survive, and just because of lack of food grains, heavy casualty began to take place. Famines basically means casualty due to lack of food availability. So lack of food availability in case of natural calamities led to huge casualty of human beings, largely because of land revenue policy that did not leave much security in the hands of the peasantry class. Third major factor that led to this development was British policy known as commercialization of agriculture. Commercialization of agriculture was another major factor that led to certain spurt of famines in India. Why? Because British authority forced Indian peasants to cultivate more and more commercial or cash crops. And large number of cash crops began to be cultivated, like sugar cane as well as indigo began to be cultivated. Along with that, even tobacco cultivation was promoted by the British in India. All these cash crops being cultivated at this time, these cash crops were cultivated in lieu of the food grain cultivation. Obviously, large areas meant for food cultivation were devoted to the cultivation of commercial crops. So lack of food availability began to emerge, and since there was lack of food availability in India, Obviously, in case of any minor natural calamity also, people didn't had anything to survive, and this resulted into severe famine situation. Clear? So commercialization of agriculture was another factor that led to famines in India. Next major factor that led to famines in India, this major factor was limited industrialization in India. Limited industrialization in India. Why limited industrialization was factor? Only cottage industries were there in India, and those cottage industries could not employ large number of people. That is why people largely remained to be unemployed and under poverty. And just because they lived under extreme poverty and hunger, in case of any minor development also, they died in large numbers, leading to famine. At the same time, industrial revolution in Britain also led to famines in India. Industrial revolution in Britain started by the middle of 18th century, whereby India was expected to supply raw cotton to feed the industries of Britain. Since raw cotton began to be cultivated in large amount as cash crop, it also affected the productivity of food grains, and since lack of food grain availability began to take place, it resulted into severe famines in India, leading to the casualty of large number of people. Clear? So recurrent famine was the typical feature of British rule in India, and certain spurt of those famines began to take place due to these policies and reasons under British East India Company. So you have to write these factors leading to certain spurt in famines in colonial India. Start the answer from the Conquest of Bengal, because the topic says from mid-18th century. And then in conclusion you write, famines became a typical feature of British policies in India, which was not found in before British and even after British rule India. So in this way you can establish forward and backward linkages in the answer that will make the answer indicating your comprehensive understanding of the topic. Clear? This would be the format of attempting this question in mains examination.